face-to-face. The only debate between Vice President Mike Pence and Democrat VP contender Kamala Harris is scheduled for tonight in Utah. We have a preview. Too close to call. The chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee is facing a tough re-election battle in South Carolina. Coronavirus crisis. Lawmakers consider the next steps after negotiations are cut short on a COVID-19 relief bill. And carry a rosary. Pope Francis makes a request of the faithful during his weekly talk at the Vatican. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, October 7th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight, Salt Lake City, Utah hosts the most highly anticipated vice presidential debate in recent memory as Vice President Mike Pence faces off against his Democratic challenger, Senator Kamala Harris. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with more. Eric?
Well, Tracy, besides the two candidates tonight, the coronavirus will also be taking center stage out there in Utah as the major topic of discussion. And viewers are also going to notice something different, plexiglass all over the stage. It was put on by the Commission of Presidential Debates at the request of Senator Kamala Harris. Just another physical reminder of the pandemic affecting all Americans. Inside Kingsbury Hall at the University of Utah, barriers are up.
Safety must be job one for this debate. And so the debate commission has the responsibility to make sure that everybody who is participating and everybody who is in the debate hall is safe and sound.
While safety is job number one, Senator Kamala Harris is expected to focus on the vice president's role as the head of the coronavirus task force. The Democratic Party says, quote, Pence must answer for the administration's failed COVID-19 response. Senator Harris will make history as the first black woman in a vice presidential debate. The Republican National Committee says Vice President Pence should ask her about Joe Biden's history of, quote, policies that have hurt black families. Whether Senator Harris's support for abortion will come up is less clear. She is endorsed by Planned Parenthood Action.
A safe and legal abortion protected as a fundamental and constitutional right.
And Senator Harris, who sits on the Judiciary Committee, has pledged to oppose President Trump's nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Judge Barrett has a long record of opposing abortion and reproductive rights.
Today, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi shared debate advice for Senator Harris.
Be yourself. She's going to be great.
And the vice president says he's ready.
I look forward to the opportunity to take our case to the American people for 4 more years for President Donald Trump in the White House. Thank you all very much.
Recall back in 2008, Joe Biden took part in the most watched vice presidential debate in history when he faced off against Sarah Palin. A total of 69.9 million people viewed in for that debate. We'll have to see if records are going to be broken tonight. Tracy?
Indeed. Thank you so much, Eric. Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill tonight. And joining me now on Skype to offer his perspective on tonight's vice presidential debate is John Gizzi, chief political columnist and White House correspondent for Newsmax. John, welcome back. Great to have you on. As Eric reported, the COVID-19 pandemic will be very much center stage tonight as the VP candidates face off. Vice President Pence is both a candidate and the chair of the Trump administration's coronavirus task force. What do you think he needs to do tonight in order to counter the attacks on the administration's response?
Well, I think he needs to do a repeat of his performance 4 years ago when, by most accounts, he bested then vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine. And this was done by, one, being informed and looking presidential, two, defending the president without looking obsequious, and more importantly this time than before, being polite. I had a long conversation with Steve Cooley, former district attorney of Los Angeles, and the 2010 narrow loser to Kamala Harris for the office of Attorney General of California. And he said simply, you cannot be perceived as a man beating up on a woman and be polite at all times, as he was, And he contrasted that with his own aggressive, go for the jugular performance against the male DA of LA County that he unseated. And if Vice President Pence does all those things, he will come out on top.
John, what are you looking to hear from Senator Harris tonight?
Senator Harris, herself a former prosecutor, is someone who is going to go on the attack. Make no mistake about it. And she will, I believe, focus almost exclusively on the vice president's role as chairman of the coronavirus task force and blame him for the fact that now there are more than 200,000 deaths from corona, 201,000 to be exact. In addition, I think a lot of the Trump policies and the Supreme Court appointments are going to be subject for the fodder of Senator Harris. That said, she has debated before. She is best known for her very clever lines, such as when she recalled Vice President Biden's opposition to forced busing across city lines in the Senate, and in the process said a little girl benefited from the busing across town that you opposed. I am that little girl. Very clever, endearing to some, and that's something the Vice President Pence has to watch out for.
John, as you know, Mike Pence and Kamala Harris both have strong appeal to their bases, which, as we know, are very different from one another. How do you think that's going to play out tonight in the debate?
Well, I think the base is going to be reinforced by the vice presidential candidates who are respectfully to the left and to the right of their nominees, Senator Harris being to the left of the centrist Joe Biden, and Vice President Pence being to the right of the more center-right Donald Trump. I have a feeling that they will enhance their particular bases with a strong performance. But the idea of these debates is to reach out to other voters. Now, historically, the vice presidential debate does not serve that purpose. I've been watching the VP debates since the very first one in 1976, and there's nothing really memorable aside from clever and cute comebacks that the candidates make. This time will be different, if for no other reason than the nominees for president have the highest median age of presidential candidates in American history, Donald Trump being 74, Joe Biden being 77. And Americans are going to think, subconsciously and perhaps discuss it, that whoever becomes vice president is a heartbeat away from the presidency and may succeed to the job before the next 4 years are up.
Well, John, we have to leave it right there. Thank you so much, John Gizzi, chief political columnist and White House correspondent for Newsmax. Thanks again, John.
My pleasure.
A key Senate race has turned from being a likely win for Republicans to being a toss-up. South Carolina Republican Lindsey Graham is running for his fourth term in the Senate. His challenger, Democrat Jamie Harrison, has spent $68 million on the campaign so far, compared to Graham's $37 million. Democrats are hoping it adds up to a win for their party. President Donald Trump's physician says the president feels great. Dr. Sean Conley adds the president's physical exam and vital signs, including oxygen saturation and respiratory rate, all remain stable and in normal range. The president even returned to the Oval Office today to be briefed on stimulus talks and the hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
The White House doctor provides an encouraging update on President Donald Trump's condition, writing, "He's now been fever-free for more than 4 days, symptom-free for over 24 hours, and has not needed nor received any supplemental oxygen since initial hospitalization."
The president continues to work. He's in very good health. We're pleased with his progress.
White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows also offered an update on the president's health after first asking reporters outside the West Wing to give him space.
If y'all stay back, I'll be glad to answer.
Another key question: Where do negotiations for more stimulus money stand?
The stimulus negotiations are off. Obviously, we're looking at the potential for standalone bills. There's about 10 things that we agree on.
After earlier calling off negotiations with Congress, President Trump has been pushing to get $1,200 relief checks out to American families. Using Twitter to send a message to Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, "Move fast, I'm waiting to sign." One Democrat not impressed.
It's very clear that the president and Mitch McConnell do not put protecting American people as a priority.
The president also urges Congress to immediately approve $25 billion for airlines. Speaker Pelosi's deputy chief of staff tweeted today, Speaker Pelosi and Secretary Mnuchin spoke by phone at 9:33 a.m. The secretary inquired about a standalone airlines bill. The speaker reminded him that Republicans blocked that bill on Friday. With talk of more help, stocks rose Wednesday morning. Back at the White House, the COVID-19 infection list grows. Stephen Miller, President Trump's senior advisor, has also tested positive.
We've got a number of safety protocols with full PPE, masks, goggles, and the like for any direct interaction with the president in those areas.
Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
The Department of Justice announces charges against 2 British members of ISIS. The men are accused of taking part in gruesome acts of violence, including the beheading and torture of Americans captured in Syria. Correspondent Mark Irons reports. Mark?
Tracy, El-Shefe al-Sheikh and Alexander Cote were scheduled to appear in a federal court in Virginia today. The charges against them highlight their involvement in the barbaric treatment of aid workers and journalists. And today, FBI Director Christopher Wray said his agency is committed to combating terrorism, and it remains a top priority.
Today, we're demonstrating that resolve by bringing to our shores 2 men who left Britain to become ISIS terrorists. Now they're going to face justice in an American court of law for crimes against American citizens.
The 2 men were among a group of ISIS terrorists dubbed the Beatles by their captives because of their British accents. The indictment describes them as leading participants in a brutal hostage-taking scheme targeting American and European citizens from 2012 through 2015.
Their alleged criminal acts include conspiring to commit hostage-taking resulting in death and conspiring to murder American citizens James Foley, Kayla Mueller, Stephen Sotloff, and Peter Kassig.
Relatives of those slain hostages praised the DOJ for transferring the men to the U.S. for trial, saying, "Now our families can pursue accountability for these crimes against our children in a U.S. court." The 2 alleged terrorists have been in U.S. military custody since 2019. A year before that, they were captured in Syria by the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces. And Tracy, the DOJ has long wanted to put these 2 men on trial.
Correspondent Mark Irons reporting for us tonight. Thank you so much, Mark. Iran is reporting nearly 240 deaths from COVID-19. That is the highest number in a single day. Iranian state TV also said today that doctors recorded over 4,000 new cases in the last 24 hours. The Islamic Republic has been struggling with the region's largest outbreak and the highest number of fatalities in the Middle East. Well, there is a political crisis brewing in the Central Asian country of Kyrgyzstan after election results from Sunday were canceled. Earlier today, the prime minister resigned. Mass protests erupted across the country, and a violent crackdown by police has left 1 person dead and over 500 injured. Opposition parties took control of the security services while vigilante groups are maintaining the peace. A lawmaker released from prison has been named as the acting prime minister. The Cardinal of Colombo, Sri Lanka, is reacting to the release of last year's Easter bombing suspects as, quote, sad and unfortunate. ISIS suicide bombers targeted 2 Catholic churches as well as an evangelical church and 4 hotels on Easter Sunday in 2019, killing 219 people. Today, the government said 5 of the 7 suspects were released for lack of evidence. Pope Francis asked the faithful to rediscover the beauty of the Rosary.
La preghiera è un confronto con Dio e un lasciarsi inviare.
At his weekly talk with pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father also encouraged us to carry a rosary everywhere we go, saying the prayers have been helping the faithful for centuries. He was speaking on the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary, but his remarks come as Italy is dealing with another wave of COVID-19, and the Vatican has announced masks are now mandatory at all times. EWTN News Rome correspondent Colin Flynn joins us now and attended the talk with the Pope this morning. Hello, Colin. Thank you for joining us. What exactly do these new COVID rules entail?
Good evening, Tracy. Well, the new rules here at the Vatican are that everyone, whether you're a worker, a visitor, anyone within the walls of Vatican City State, must now wear a mask. It had always been recommended to wear a face mask when you're in St. Peter's Square, the Basilica, anywhere within the Vatican. But now, as of yesterday, it is mandatory after a letter was sent to all the heads of the different departments within the Vatican. And it seems, Tracy, that they're taking their cues from local authorities who here in Rome have made it mandatory to wear a face mask since October the 3rd.
Colin, can you give us an update on the coronavirus situation in Italy as a whole?
Unfortunately, for the 9th consecutive week, the numbers are rising across Italy. In the last 7 days alone, there were 909 new cases of COVID-19. And when you compare that to the week previously, it was 832. So the graph, unfortunately, is creeping back up in this second wave. People are looking at this and wondering what may be causing it. And one of the possibilities is the children returning to school. Kids are back in the classroom here. And indeed, that's been linked solidly to 14 cases. Now, to try and clamp down on this rise, the authorities are imposing much heavier penalties. If you're caught in public without wearing a face mask out in the open, you now could be fined up to €1,000.
Colin, as far as the general audience with the Pope, was it any different because of these new rules?
Yeah, Tracy, there were a few differences this morning at the general audience. The first big one was that it was held indoors. This is the first time since the outbreak of the coronavirus that they held the general audience indoors. It was in Paul VI Hall, which is just to the left of the Vatican. And they have done a lot in the hall, in the auditorium, to try and ensure social distancing. So, for instance, when you sit down, the seat on either side of you has been removed and a row in front and behind you. So there is a good bit of distance between you and the people around you. But the one thing that struck me as someone who was there for the first time, it was my first general audience with the Pontiff, was that the people who were visiting from all over the world were adhering to the new mandatory mandate to wear face masks in the Vatican. They all had them on. But the Pope himself choosing not to wear a face mask, and I know this is a decision he's been making a lot recently, but it was also surprising to see that much of his security detail, the bodyguards that were walking behind him as he went down the aisle towards the stage at the front, they were not wearing face masks either, and in quite close proximity to the people who were on either side. But he did seem a bit more reluctant in his interactions with people. Towards the end, a group of priests lay their hands over him. They gave him a beautiful blessing, and he did go on to kiss their hands. So I know that this kind of interaction and the fact that the Pope doesn't wear a mask at events like this does raise some eyebrows around the world. But Tracy, there was a beautiful moment at the end of the general audience, was when the Pope went up to this family to give them a blessing, and there was a young boy there who was obviously quite excited to see the Pope up close and personal, and you could see that he wanted to go over and give him a hug, but had probably been well warned about the coronavirus, and he was a little bit reluctant. You could see the Pontiff was a small bit reluctant as well, but in the end they gave each other a small gentle hug, much to the delight and the applause of all the crowd that were there.
Colin, thank you for sharing that story. That was really lovely, and thank you for your report today. Colin Flynn, EWTN News Rome correspondent. Thanks again, Colin.
Thanks, Tracy.
Coming up, Senator Mitch McConnell is coming to the defense of Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. We'll explain. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell comes to the defense of the president's Supreme Court nominee, Catholic Amy Coney Barrett. He writes, "It is the definition of discrimination to assert that Justice Barrett's particular faith makes her uniquely unqualified for this promotion." It comes in response to media reports this week seeking to paint Judge Barrett as a religious radical for practicing her faith. Well, tonight we take a closer look at comments made by Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden on abortion. The former vice president was asked by an audience member at an NBC News town hall on Monday what he would do to protect, quote, women's reproductive rights in the U.S. should Judge Amy Coney Barrett be confirmed. Joe Biden responded, quote, number one, we don't know exactly what she will do, although the expectation is that she may very well move to overrule, that is, Roe, adding, quote, the only responsible response to that would be to pass legislation making Roe the law of the land, and that's what I would do. Joining me now to offer her analysis is Catherine Hadro, host of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Catherine, welcome back. Always good to get your insight. So what's your reaction to Joe Biden's response?
Well, unfortunately, it's not surprising. He has said this before, but it's still deeply disappointing. It's disappointing because Catholic politicians have a particular responsibility to defend and protect our most vulnerable. It's disappointing because we've seen Joe Biden grow increasingly extreme on the abortion issue over the span of his political career. And Tracy, this proposal to codify Roe is also extreme. It would mean legal, unlimited abortion on demand. And polling suggests that most Americans are not aware of that. Most Americans do not realize that is what codifying Roe would mean. And we also know, based on polling, that that would not be popular with Americans. Most do not want to see abortion in the third trimester. So not only was this proposal that was said yet again by Joe Biden this week extreme, it's also unpopular.
Catherine, how significant do you expect the abortion issue to be the remainder of the 2020 campaign season?
It's a central issue to the 2020 election campaign. I mean, look at the backdrop of what's happening right now amidst tonight's debate even. It's the upcoming Senate confirmation hearing and vote for Amy Coney Barrett, President Trump's Supreme Court nominee. Just like we were just discussing, many people are already speculating and wondering what Barrett on the bench would mean for the future of Roe v. Wade and for abortion laws in the United States. And we also know, based on the 2016 election, that the top reason Americans voted for President Trump in 2016 was the Supreme Court issue. So it's certainly going to be central to 2020 election day as well.
Catherine, let's talk about tonight's vice presidential debate. Of course, is the one and only time the Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Harris will face off. What are you expecting tonight?
It's going to be tense. I mean, Harris and Pence could not be further apart on the issue of abortion on particular. I will say, though, I'm not necessarily expecting Harris to use the word abortion pretty frequently. She'll likely use a lot of euphemisms like women's health and women's rights, because I believe she's going to try to portray Mike Pence, the only man on the stage, as this man who's going to go after and take away women's rights. But Tracy, as we know, abortion ends the life of an innocent human being. It affects children, it affects women, it affects men, it affects all future generations to come. And I do suspect that Pence will be solid on the life issue tonight. But if you had to ask me, out of all the 2020 presidential Democratic candidates, I would have said Harris was the most extreme on the abortion issue. And here she is, the Democratic vice presidential nominee.
Well, Catherine, thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate having you on.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy.
And a reminder, you can watch EWTN Pro-Life Weekly Thursdays at 10 p.m. For other airing times, visit EWTN.com. Up next, another ruling for Catholics in Wisconsin on the requirement to go to church. And remembering 25 years since the historic blessing of the Vatican's mission to the United Nations. Catholics in Wisconsin do not have to go to church after a spike in cases of COVID-19. The Bishop of Green Bay is reinstating the dispensation to attend Sunday Mass because of the increase. Last month, Bishop David Ricken lifted the Mass requirement, saying, attending Mass is a natural reflection of our faith as his disciples. Dozens of countries are calling on the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights to investigate abuses in Xinjiang and Hong Kong. The U.S. is joining 38 other countries in signing a joint statement condemning human rights abuses by China. The German ambassador says it specifically asked China not to forcibly return Muslim Uyghurs who tried to escape the concentration camps. And you can read more about the Chinese camps for Muslims at our sister publication, CatholicNewsAgency.com. And finally tonight, today is the 25th anniversary of the blessing of the headquarters of the Holy See Mission to the United Nations. The mission offices in New York City were purchased back in 1994 with the help of a loan from the Knights of Columbus. 1 year later, on October 7th, St. John Paul II blessed the mission before a crowd that included U.S. cardinals and bishops. He said the new facility was a reminder of our call to pray for the salvation of the whole human family and of the work needed to bring peace to the world. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.